Quick announcement, folks. React Universe Conf 2024 is on September 5th and 6th in Wrocław, formerly React Native EU. We are now embracing all things React and React Native. Meet your tech idols, enjoy insightful talks from industry leaders, and network like never before. Tickets are limited, so grab yours soon at reactuniverseconf.com. Don't forget, combo tickets for the conference and workshops are available too.
Hello everyone, I'm Łukasz, and this is the React Native Show podcast. Today we are discussing the OMH, which is Open Mobile Hub. And forgot to mention, this podcast is brought to you by Callstack, the total software engineering consultancy. I'm Łukasz from Callstack. Today with me is Diego Zuluaga from OMH. Hello Diego, how are you?
Hey Łukasz, thank you for having me in your show.
And also my colleague from Callstack, Kuba Luberadzki. Hello Kuba, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm delighted to be here.
So guys, I'd like you to introduce yourselves, and I will start with Diego. Diego, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your role in OMH, and maybe briefly what OMH is?
Hi everyone. Hi Łukasz. Hi Kuba. Thank you for inviting me to the Callstack podcast. I'm the Technical Solution Director at Open Mobile Hub, OMH, within FutureWay. I joined about over a year ago this initiative, and what I do on a day-to-day basis is enabling developers by providing developer tooling and SDKs that fix fragmentation and interoperability issues with Android native and cross-platform apps, with React Native, and in the future with Flutter. So the idea what I do is I enable developers, I raise awareness about the challenges that they will run into these issues when rolling out their apps in other regions where there is no GMS available, and also in the cross-platform, also all the challenges that they face. So I work very closely with them, but also I work very closely with technology partners implementing the roadmap of OMH. So you guys, Callstack, have been great at helping us implementing this roadmap. And in the past experience, I work at Google as a developer relations engineer and software developer. And the reason my drive is to push for OMH is because I experienced firsthand the developer fragmentation and challenges when implementing features into apps, and realized the opportunity to give it a hand there. So I also work on other areas in Android, like, of course, Android more specifically in predictive back gesture. So if you guys have used the feature to go back, swipe inwards in your phone,
I have.
in checking that animation, which is new. I don't know if you guys seen it, that it's not completely enabled. It's kind of like behind the flag, although they are going to enable it pretty soon. That's one of the features that I work on when I was at Google. And also other features like emoji compat. So if you are familiar with unko in Japanese for the poop emoji, yeah, I'm guilty of that. I was part of the team that enabled developers with all the latest and greatest and inclusive emojis. Besides that, I work in Google Assistant, more specifically in Android App Actions. So Android App Actions, if you guys are familiar, it's a natural language processing capability in Android that you can use to actually trigger features in your app, like, hey, order a pizza with pineapple and pepperoni. Please don't kill me any Italian in the group.
That is risky.
Exactly, yeah. But these type of features and I implemented. And also I work at IBM on integration, customizing the tooling and the solutions for sales performance management.
That's such a vast experience. Great to have you on the show, and I'm sure we'll have a great discussion about OMH and about GMS. You already said the acronym. We'll decipher the acronym later. But you also said that you work with partners, and like you said, Callstack is one of the partners for OMH, working on the roadmap. And I'm sure, Kuba, you will tell us more about it after your introduction.
Oh yeah, definitely. Hi again. I'm Kuba. I'm a BA working with Callstack, and yes, with Diego and together with our talented team of developers, I think worked for like the past 7 months to deliver the OH initiative, and take it all the way through developing the modules, the provider plugins that we have in this open source software library that is delivered both for Android and React Native developers.
And then I don't want to jump too much deep into this because we have a roadmap for our episode, and let's stick to it because that will make more sense. But what's the GMS?
Well, I mean, I think we need to kind of like break down the onion or like layer down the onion into multiple pieces, right? Because it's a pretty complex issue that I'm not sure everybody understands the complexity in mobile development. But I think we should kind of like break it down into two major components. Each component has thousands of parts, but for the sake of simplicity, we're talking about Android open source project. So bare bones Android, the distribution that it's available for anyone to fork. And we need to talk about Google Mobile Services, GMS.
GMS is Google Mobile Services. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, as I mentioned, AOSP, it's an open source version of Android, which is maintained by Google. It has the basic operating system without any Google's proprietary apps and services, right? And it's available free to anyone to use and modify. However, there is a layer on top of it, right? Which is called GMS.
So let's maybe stick around. Let's stick around in Android open source project for a while. What are the products? What are the use cases of using AOSP without Google Mobile Services?
It's a good question, right? In many cases, if you want to deliver a device that it's stripped down from any other services, for instance, a use case that I noticed recently on a trip to Japan was, you see back in the taxis or Ubers, some screens that displays videos or show you kind of like a survey, or you can actually search for something on those devices. Those are devices that a company sold to these ride-hailing companies, and they have in their cars, and they probably don't need all the bells and whistles of Google mobile services like Google Maps. They might not need that. They don't use security because there is no third-party apps using AOSP. It's just a device with a single app from that vendor, and they don't allow to run any other apps. So there is no need for app and device integrity. They don't need push notifications. They don't need in-app purchases, although that's questionable. It would be great if you could buy directly from there. But yeah, this type of kind of like common devices.
You could say like single-purpose, custom-made device for one purpose, not a mobile, fully-fledged device.
Exactly. The more personal devices that indeed require these services, more communal devices, I will say, can leverage these stripped down versions based on AOSP, right? A communal device, I mean devices that you can use anonymously, right? You are in a cab driver, you don't need to authenticate with your account. You just use directly as is. But for any other use cases, you definitely need all these capabilities, because definitely you need security, you need to authentication, you need to make purchases, you need push notifications, all these capabilities.
Oh, you already started talking about what are the services in Google Mobile Services are. But so one category of AOSP usage would be the single-purpose devices. What are the other big categories of AOSP usage?
Well, the idea is that you very quickly run into apps that or OEMs, right? That manufacture devices, and they indeed need to be like mobile devices, and they need these AOSPs, a version of Android, so they can add their own services. They not necessarily want to have any particular services from one vendor, but they want to enable other services from other providers.
And it's not only services; it's also the layer of UI, right? We can simply say that even almost every phone that is in an iPhone, to some degree, might be using AOSP in general,
either directly from Google with GMS or customizing it with their own services, like Amazon, for example.
Exactly. Or OnePlus, or Honor, or HTC that used to be quite famous some time ago.
Yeah, I had an HTC that were HTC. Those were great phones. Okay, to recap the Android ecosystem, we have this open source project, Android open source project that anyone can use, and then on top of that, almost everyone that uses Android open source project has to either use Google mobile services, which are licensed, and you have to obtain a license from Google, or you have to re-implement all of the parts that you need in your application. And services, we mean authentication, we mean storage, we mean Google Maps. Maps.
Simply maps.
In general. And then you basically have to like put that together yourself.
Well, you can put that together, although of course it's a long road if you try to implement, but you can rely on third-party services, right? So there is and that's what we try to incentivize with an open mobile ecosystem is, hey, why there is no, there are many very strong products out there, so services providers that provide the similar type of services that Google mobile services does, right? So we're talking about in Maps. There's a myriad of service providers that can give you the same capabilities, and I will dare to say even better than Google Maps, right? So typically, to be more realistic, I would say leverage the existing service providers out there, right? And almost in every category, there is one company providing a solution for that. Yeah. And to elaborate a little bit further, we were talking about Amazon Fire OS. We're talking about Meta, right? With Horizon OS, right? Which is a fork of AOSP, right? And they have different stores. They have different SDKs specific for their own device. And we're talking about even Huawei with Harmony OS that also has its own SDK HMS kit as well that provides similar services. And I mean, there are some products that are going to be discontinued, like Microsoft with a subsystem for Android, which is also an AOSP version that doesn't run GMS, of course, because it doesn't have the license for GMS.
Yeah. So I think broadly, we painted a picture what are the services and why maybe you don't always want to use Google mobile services. So what's the place of Open Mobile Hub in all of this? What are you trying? Who is Open Mobile Hub, and what are you trying to achieve?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, and the Open Mobile Hub it adds two purposes, and it's reflected in its architecture, which we're probably gonna cover it later in the podcast. But definitely there is the mobile development is divided in two worlds. I will classify them. One is the native development and cross-platform development. And we're in the middle of the transition, right? The fights about go mobile first native or go cross-platform first. I don't want to get into any of those wars because actually OMH promotes both. But I have my own beliefs as well. But in the case of native first, we were talking about GMS, non-GMS, even iOS. Developers on the native side need these frameworks to expand to multiple regions or for operational efficiencies, better services, more competition, more innovation, right? So in this case, OMH provides services for native developers, more specifically for Android non-GMS. And the idea is that we don't want to replicate the world as it is right now, which is developers have to scramble with learning multiple SDKs. If you go from one SDK to another, you have to probably almost rewrite big features in your app, right? It's not trivial to say, I'm going to switch from this map provider to this other map provider for a ride-hailing app, right?
It's like a vendor lock-in. When you start to using some SDK and you are deep into your features with that SDK, it tends to be harder to change your provider to some other provider, to some other SDK.
Exactly. And it's a big issue because even it's documented. Large companies have been had crashes that they lost billions of dollars because some services went down. And like I said, switching from one provider to another is not trivial. It's not that you can say, hey, something is breaking. No, now let's switch from this map provider to another. And it's just like a flip of a switch, right? That's the one thing. And I mentioned also cross-platform, right? On the cross-platform side, we also realized that we don't need more complexity for developers. The world as is too complex. It's overwhelming for developers learning another framework. It's another platform. We even in the React Native space, when you try to target at different devices, it's still not as straightforward as it should be, right? So why not also having a common interface or a unified interface for these service providers that wraps them around, provides the same affordances so developers can access these services without having to worry about what is the function name in this SDK and what is the function name in other SDK.
Exactly, and that was the main point of OMH when we started working, to unify it, right? To make it like a one-stop shop to develop independent of the provider or plugin that you select with the same code behind, and letting the OMH library sort of take care of the logic when serving to, in this instance, GMS, non-GMS, with your configuration behind.
So I imagine, let me phrase it so that I understand, and let me tell you if I'm right or wrong. OMH set up to create something like Google mobile services for non-GMS devices, and thus allow people to use Android open source project without GMS, and also provide provider change capability so that this is provider agnostic almost, so that you can use different tools, different providers. Maps is a great example because Maps is easy to wrap your head around because you have Google Maps, Apple Maps, like Nokia Maps, it's Here Maps now, and then OpenStreet, and there are a bunch of other providers for that. I'm not sure in like the other packages that you have, what are the providers in the sense of providing authentication or storage, but we will talk about that later, like you said. So that's the mission, right?
That is right.
Okay. And then In a broader sense, OMH, is that a foundation? Is that a like organization? How do you work on the daily basis? How do you work?
Right. OMH started as an initiative, kind of like independent initiative, right? However, we realized that make it completely independent and also neutral. So, there is no monopoly down the line from any organizations about the framework. We needed to be part of an organization that foster innovation, promote open source development, enable developers, help with the outreach. And the best foundation for this was Linux Foundation Europe. And that gave us kind of like the platform to access more developers and actually be part of their mission. So as you guys know, Linux Foundation has been around for a while, since 2000, and it's a non-profit organization. Yeah, they fostered the growth of open source projects. Of course, this is nothing new for anyone, but very quick overview. And they provide a neutral and collaborative platform for developers, companies, and communities. And more importantly, they ensure security and compliance as well. So there are some adherence to software standards and regulatory compliance as well, which sometimes they are an oversight in most projects that become open source. But for a project like this, we thought this was kind of like a first-class requirement.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a must-have to start off and work this whole set of plugins, of modules into the OSS world, especially like giving an environment to collaborate, giving an environment to help like broaden and help lead this mission. Because like moving a little bit into the future, that like the storage, the maps, and authentication is not the only modules that are on the roadmap, as there's a lot of things, as we already established. GMS with their APIs, SDKs have a lot of other functionalities, and this is just like scratching the surface, I would say.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and what a better organization than Linux Foundation, especially for open standards as well. We believe this should be part of a open standard at the same time. It shouldn't be developed in isolation, defined by a single organization. It should be part of a community effort. So that's our goal of joining Linux Foundation.
Okay, awesome. And then, so I understand the Android ecosystem. I understand what is an OMH. I want to talk about the framework. I want to talk about packages themselves. But before that, let's maybe talk about the use cases of actually using your packages, not from the company point of view, not the point of view of some manufacturer using Android open source project, but the point of view of a product. Why would I go for non-GMS standard? What are the benefits to the end user, to my product?
Right. Definitely having options for developers. It's a key benefit for developers, and operational efficiencies as well, right? So as a developer, being able to not avoid vendor lock-in and have access to an interoperable framework is very important. Definitely, sometimes when you start a small app, this is not a big priority, right? Because you are kind of like kicking tires, learning the framework, you enjoy working with certain provider, and you stick to it for a while because you're starting and learning that. But for companies, when you start kind of like becoming an app that is trending app, and you see more adoption of your app, you start thinking about what ifs, right? what if the service provider that I have my app start increasing the prices of these services because they charge per request, right? And if they charge 10% more for your app, that's 10% less revenue that you are going to obtain, right? For instance, in-app purchases, right? We see all these legal challenges that big tech is facing because of hiking up the prices and forcing developers to pay 30% fees for purchases through the platform. So these type of challenges are impacting app developers as well, and they want to have a choice so they can actually pick the solutions that suits better for them. And also region. Sometimes some services aren't available in a specific region, right? So if you deploy your app in Singapore or in Japan, which are becoming highly regulated as well, what do you do about it, right? If you have other choices and options that don't bring down your app, that you say, hey, I need to turn off my app for a few weeks until I implement in-app purchases again or another mapping service? Or will it be a better world if you say, okay, I'm able to switch different providers and my users is completely seamless, right? So that's a huge plus. And we believe that the future also benefits from having a solution that is more agnostic. It drives more innovation, right? What if we're stuck with the same platform, same services, what is the incentive for these companies to improve? So yeah, we realize that this is a challenge, and we are facing it head on.
That is true, and I think there's an additional part to it, right? It's the control over the experience the developers serve to users, because with GMS, non-GMS, you don't have that possibility, right? With OMH, however, that possibility to control how the users experience your app, right? How it is served to both, how it even, I think a brilliant example is what came out of our research, is that developers have this need, for instance, in some regions to actually be more precise when serving maps, right? Because some of the providers have better maps or more frequently used within a particular region or within a particular user base. And that's where we tackle that issue with OMH, to allow that possibility and to allow those developers to sort of take those SDKs by the reins and just do whatever they want, whatever they need and their users need with it.
Yeah, I guess this is such a good example. I have two thoughts on this. One is that maybe in some cases, in some regions, people don't have a Google account to authenticate, and maybe they don't want to have one. I'm not sure where is that the case, but like you said, maybe in some user groups, hackers, for example, that might be the case. So you might want to authenticate with something else. And the second, something that Diego said, so from that particular use case, it seems like this might be a tool to democratize somehow the market for services, and that smaller service providers might want to team up with you to include their services in your solution.
That is right. Yeah. And that's actually one of the foundation of OMH as well, right? We don't want to lock in the services that are surfaced by OMH. We want to make it the framework extensible based on what we call plugins, which are pretty much implementations of the interfaces that surface multiple services. So if a developer or from one of company from Maps wants to incorporate another or another service or an authentication or cloud storage or an in-app purchase, they will be able to get those interfaces, implement them according to the definition, and then they automatically become part of another plugin that developers can use in their apps, and they can swap out and swap in new components anytime.
Okay, so you already started talking about technology, talking about implementations, talking about APIs. So let's jump into this. I'm gonna refer to like your solutions as a framework. I'm not sure if that's a good word to use there, but in my mind it is. Your framework contains of 3 packages now and more on the roadmap, but also, I imagine, some common parts. So can you explain what the framework looks like? What are the design principles that you want all of your packages to follow? What is the architecture of the solution? And et cetera, et cetera.
Cool. Yeah, the OMH right now, the current implementation includes maps, authentication, and storage. But we know that the gaps are bigger, right? There are many gaps. There are many more services that are missing in non-GMS devices. So we have a roadmap, of course, of other features that I can mention after I explain each one of the modules. So this kind of like the 3 main components available. So we have maps. And maps is supports Android and React Native. It provides mapping and navigation capabilities, right? And iOS, of course, because it's React Native, of course. How can I miss that? So yeah, and the current status is completed and available for use. It supports multiple providers. We have support for Mapbox, OpenStreetMap, Azure Maps, and of course, Google Maps. It comes with a set of interfaces that each one of these maps we currently implemented, right? So what OMH does is kind of like a wrapper, right? That through composition, you offer access to under the hood to the same map technology. And but it's a common interface across all of them. And this interface is extensible, but also it also allows kind of like it's future proofing, right? So that means that if there are features, because this is a very common challenge for developers, if they want to actually leverage the technology under the hood, there is kind of like something we call unofficially like an escape hatch. So developers can say, you know what, I am able to implement 90% of my features with Open Mobile Hub, but if I need to access some vendor-specific feature that it's great, I want to have access to these affordances, right? So that's kind of like that. And in authentication, it's we also support Android and React Native. As its name goes, it's an authentication SDK and identity management. And it's completely available to use. It supports various authentication methods based on OAuth 2.0. It integrates with multiple providers like Dropbox, Google accounts, Microsoft accounts, and Facebook, right?
Diego, why Dropbox in authentication?
Dropbox is a good, very solid alternative for developers for storage, right? So definitely we wanna. That leads me to my next module, which is, of course, the storage module, right? And that's why we, in order to be able to access the Dropbox storage module, you need OMH authentication, right? So first you need to authenticate the user, then you need to access with the authenticated user in Dropbox. You will use it in the storage module, right? So yeah, the storage module is the next one. It provides access to cloud storage solutions like Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, and more, right? So In terms of architecture, Łukasz, as I mentioned before,
Can we point one thing out, Diego? Just
absolutely.
before we go. I want to point out the thing that how holistically the OMH authentication, maps, and storage are sort of together, like from the very beginning, from the architecture, from the use cases that we have, right? So we have authentication that delivers the foundation for anything within storage, right? To be able to authenticate within your disk, within your cloud storage, so to speak. But then the same authentication can be utilized in maps, because you may have an account in maps. You may have already something stored. The developers at some point love to utilize such things. So within coming to OMH, it's already giving you a really, really nice foundation to personalize that experience, not only to control it, but also to personalize it within the functionalities that they will have, right? The same thing goes for Google Maps with their, for instance, recommendations of all the places, but the same thing goes for OpenStreetMaps. And for instance, places I recognize somewhere on the roadmap, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what the pattern that we see, right? All these services are part either built by a service provider that is specialized in a specific solution, like Maps, Mapbox, but sometimes they are part of like a big organization like Microsoft, right? Like, as you mentioned, for Google, you have this. For Microsoft, it's also another universe, right? They have Azure Maps, they have Microsoft accounts, they have OneDrive, and they have many other solutions that leverage the Microsoft accounts.
You described how the framework is all stitched together and then the separate packages. What's the API for the developer from the packages? How do I use the solution? What is the API for me?
That's right. Yeah. So that's something that I probably forgot to mention is we dig deeper into it. The OMH, as I mentioned, is Android native and React native as well, right? So in order to do that, we need OMH supports two-layer architecture. What that means is that on the native side, on the Android native side, we provide Kotlin SDK, right? That is available for each one of these sub SDKs, if you want to name it like that. So yeah, the ability to, and that the idea is that developers simply use in Gradle the dependencies, right? These dependencies, you declare the dependencies in Gradle for either one of these modules, and then you have multiple clients for maps, clients for authentication, or clients for storage, and from there it's very similar. It's very idiomatic as well. Clients providers,
plugins.
Okay.
Exactly. And the API is very similar to an idiomatic, or very familiar to what current developers use. If you use Google Maps, the interface is very intuitive, and it kind of provides similar interfaces that you've used in the past. So you are not completely building an SDK that the naming conventions are completely different, right? So that's layer one. Layer two is cross-platform, right? Cross-platform, we are talking about React Native, of course. And in the future, there are going to be more frameworks that we support, like Flutter, NativeScript, and others. But for now, our main goal is to do a good job with React Native, which is huge. And the challenge is, of course, what we wanted to leverage in the cross-platform framework is not to use directly the under the hood, the SDKs, but instead of that, using layer one SDKs from OMH. So in that case, we kind of like dog food and make sure that the cross-platform framework also leverage these capabilities, right? Via the new architecture in React Native. So that's at a high level. Definitely, we have it's more complex than this, and we can dedicate a full session talking about how it was implemented and more like a deep dive.
That's actually my one of my last questions. We are slowly wrapping up the episodes. So where can people find, and maybe what can people find online about this? What do we have in terms of developer support? Can people contribute? How should they contribute? How providers maybe can sign up for support?
Right. Thank you. Yeah, no, the definitely we want. It's the framework still. There are some parts that are completed and available for apps to incorporate them. There are some parts that are in kind of like early access program, so developers can sign up to access this. And we have all of our repos are in GitHub. The main point of access is openmobilehub.org website, and it points to all the getting started, all the guidelines, all the readmes and sample apps and guidelines to implement plugins. So from there, you will find a ton of documentation, API references.
But most importantly, repos with the solution. And we welcome more than we actually can phrase new providers, new developers, because again, OMH is an OSS initiative. It is meant to be with contribution. It is meant to be extended in the long run. And of course, as usual, because we love to base it on data, we love to get feedback from users. That is the most important part for us to drive the roadmap even more.
Yes, definitely. Good call, Kuba. We want partners. We want usage of the API. We welcome bots. We welcome PRs. Please get your hands dirty and let us know what you like, what you don't like, how we can improve it. And of course, we have as part of the Linux Foundation, we have a monthly technical steering committee that is available in GitHub. Anybody can join us and tell us your use cases, any comments. This is a public meeting that we hold every month. So please join us and let us know what your use case, and we welcome anybody, any contributions from anybody.
I liked how you said bugs are welcome.
Absolutely. There will be, but we hope, I think the framework is pretty solid, but it's still under use and we need more testing for sure.
I definitely recommend everyone to check it out because this is such a fresh, unique project. Usually, on the day-to-day basis, we developers, we don't think about Google Mobile Services. We don't think about all that glue that ties in the raw operating system with actual user-facing services. I don't even know how to phrase that, but this, like you said, this thin layer of services makes your app, makes your experience personalizable and unique, let's say.
That's the thing. You think Android, you think Google. You don't even think that there's another world out there which gives you a lot more flexibility, a lot more compatibility, and a lot more control. Actually, that's pretty funny because again, with the principle that we had in mind, we based everything on Google being the golden standard. But as we were developing and trying to reach our capacity within the other modules, within the other providers, we also call them plugins, right? So for instance, Mapbox or OpenStreetMaps, we were trying to get, or actually we got there to get the parity what Google offers. But we saw that there's so much more in some of the providers. Some of the maps bring a much broader experience, a much better experience, and something that the developers can leverage. Also thanks to OMH, because we give that control and that ability to moderate and to modify it to your liking and to your users' liking, which is the most important part. Because at the end of the day, we deliver experience to our users.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's innovation at the end of the day, right? Like, it's a shame, honestly, that what Kuba, you mentioned, there are some features that have innovation in them that make the experience so much better, but it's hidden because their user base is very tiny. So people are not familiar, but if you have the ability to say, hey, I'm going to kick tires, maybe do some A/B testing with these two, and it's so cheap because I just need to swap out and swap in, or maybe support both in multiple regions and see what is the level of engagement and user happiness with my app. I will be able to measure apples to apples, the impact of one framework versus the other.
I think that's the biggest selling point of the OMH framework. And I think that's the really nice way to wrap up this episode. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Kuba. Thank you, Diego, for coming in. Today, we were discussing OMH, Open Mobile Hub, initiative that is aiming to provide services, mobile services. I still don't know how to name that, but mobile services for devices that, for some reason or another, don't want to use Google mobile services. So you can use OMH on GMS devices, you can use it on non-GMS devices, you can swap providers, and for now, you can use maps, storage, and authentication. More to come. Bugs are welcome, like Diego said. Contributions are welcome. Feedback is welcome. Check them out. And yeah, let us know what you think about this episode, about this conversation that we just had, and have fun with it. Thank you.
Before we sign off, an exciting update. The React Native show is relaunching as React Universe on air. Shortly, we're not parting ways with React Native. Instead, we are expanding to cover every angle of cross-platform and full-stack development, from React Native to React. The content quality remains stellar, with conversations with leading tech creators and thought leaders. Prepare to explore the React universe with us. See you next time.